Without further ado, this is the Oregon House District 46 race. Colin, why don't you introduce yourself first and tell us your biography and why you're running for this seat.
So my name is Con Pham. I'm the daughter of Vietnamese refugees. I'm the wife of an immigrant, and I'm a working mom of a 5-year-old named Maya Lynn, who will start at Portland Public Schools this September. So I've been living and working in the heart of House District 46 for years now, first at APANO, the Asian Pacific American Network of Oregon, and now at OPAL, Environmental Justice Oregon. And I'm running because in this moment, when my communities are being threatened with displacement, increasing xenophobia, and now a public health and economic crisis that is hitting our most vulnerable communities the hardest, I know that we need bold leadership that comes from community. House District 46 includes the J District, with one of the highest concentrations of Asians and Pacific Islanders in the state, but we've never had an Asian or Pacific Islander legislator to represent our district. While at APANO, I helped to build the most diverse and powerful coalition that the city's ever seen to pass the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which is raising $50 million a year for renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. And that model of climate action while creating needed jobs is what we need more than ever. And I and the communities that asked me to run want to bring our experiences and our voices and this powerful vision to the state level. And that's why I'm running for House District 46.
Great.
I'm sorry. Con, can you tell us exactly what role you played at APANO?
I was the environmental justice manager and the manager of immigrant organizing.
And so what does that mean, if you don't mind?
I helped to create our Vietnamese and Chinese immigrant organizing. So we had tenants who were facing displacement from their buildings, but because of linguistic barriers, they didn't know all of their rights. And so we were able to organize them, connect them to the Legal Aid Society of Oregon, make sure that they were able to win at least a stay on rent increases, and just help unite the community and connect them to resources so that they're able to defend their tenants' rights and other immigrant rights.
Are you no longer on staff?
No, I currently serve as Alliances Director at OPAL Environmental Justice Oregon, and I convene a statewide Oregon Just Transition Alliance, which includes community groups across the state who are working towards a just transition, currently through advancing an Oregon Green New Deal.
So when did you leave APANO and why?
I left APANO in 2019 because I wanted to be able to focus my attentions solely on environmental and climate justice. I loved the work that I was doing at APANO. I'm deeply connected and continue to volunteer with the J District Steering Committee. But in this moment, I felt called to focus my career on taking action on climate justice and economic justice at the same time through climate action.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Great. Jeff, could you give us your biography and why you're seeking this seat?
Well, when I first moved up here 30 years ago, I founded the Portland Pretzel Company. And after that, I got involved in politics. I worked at Bev Stein's office and then Dan Saltzman's office. And when I worked at Dan Saltzman's office, I was his chief of staff, and we passed the Portland Children's Levy. And that showed me the power of two people could impact the broader community. And I ran for the county commission after that, and I got elected at the county commission. And I ran for the county chair after that, and I got elected the county chair. And all throughout the time I was at the county, we were suffering under the Great Recession, and we didn't cut programs, we got efficiencies. And after I left the county, I worked at Impact Northwest for 4.5 years, and that was a struggling nonprofit when I took it over, but I righted it, and it was profitable when I left it. And I'm running because I want to do something with the state, because the state is struggling now because we have the coronavirus, and I have something to offer. I I've run an executive position 3 times now, and I've struggled. I've got them to be more efficient and to focus on programs, not administrative inefficiencies. And that's why I'm running now.
Great. So day one in the Oregon legislature, Jeff, what's your first bill?
Well, my first bill would be foster kids have to live independently after they get out of the foster care system. And there's a program, Living Independently, that treats them as independents, but it doesn't have adequate funding. So I will push that to have adequate funding. So that's going to be my first bill.
Oh, same question.
For me, the first section I would take would be quorum reform. It affects every single piece of important legislation we're going to pass. And we shouldn't allow legislators to shut down our legislator just because they don't agree with what we're talking about. There's many policies that I also disagree upon, but I like cap and trade, but I absolutely don't believe that a small minority of legislators should shut down our important work that communities depend on. So I think it could look a variety of different ways, whether it's making sure we need a simple majority to be able to hold session, or forbidding legislators who have exceed a certain number of unexcused absences from running for re-election. But we need our government to be able to work for us and for the people who are in need. There was so much collateral damage to the most recent walkouts, whether it was child welfare or education funding for kids. And quorum reform is really key to passing any of the important legislation that our communities need right now.
Can you two tell me who your biggest financial contributor is to your campaign so far, who the largest donor is, and what you think they want from you? Con, you can go first.
The largest financial contributors are the Green Advocacy Project and the Oregon Trial Lawyers Association. The Green Advocacy Project wants me to be a climate champion. They want to have a legislator who's going to go to bat and not accept symbolic victories that are full of corporate loopholes or giveaways to polluters and utilities. And the Oregon Trial Lawyers Association is looking for somebody who's going to go to bat and make sure that victims have their full ability to seek compensation when they've been wronged by powerful corporations.
Jeff, same question.
Well, I've got contributions from hundreds of people, but the 2 largest contributors I've had are my mother and my brother, and they want me to be successful.
Can I pipe in here?
Please.
Can Con or Jeff, can either of you identify for us any issues in which you think you may disagree? I realize you've got sort of different sets of priorities, but it's hard from the outside to not view you both as liberal Democrats who will, vote in accordance with the Democratic majority 99.9% of the time. So is there any daylight between the two of you in terms of your attitudes about issues, or is this simply a function of experience and or effectiveness?
Well, I think that government could be run more efficiently, and I don't think that many Democrats think that's the case. I've ran the county as an efficient government. I've ran Impact Northwest as an efficient government, and I will go to the state and run it as an efficient government.
And I would say that the recent cap and trade or cap and invest legislation was a top priority for the Democratic leadership the last 2 legislative sessions. And I'm on the record in opposition. And because I studied the issue and I realized that it was not an effective mechanism to achieve its goals. And so I came out in opposition, even though it cost me a lot of political capital. And I think that's evidence that when tough issues come, I will do my research. And if I come to a different conclusion, I will stand by my values.
So let's drill down a minute. What was your objection to that cap and trade?
So if the goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and if we look at the experience of the cap and trade system in California, it has not been effective in reducing emissions. And other direct regulations, such as a renewable portfolio standard or clean fuel standards, have been the main drivers for emissions reductions. And even the coalitions themselves acknowledge it's a stopgap and a backstop, sorry. And it particularly doesn't reduce and create, in fact, really results in increased emissions in refinery impacted communities. And that's predominantly where low income Black and brown communities live. And so that means higher rates of cancer, higher rates of asthma, and that's an environmental injustice. But my biggest concern with cap and trade is that it allows by passing something that is more of a symbolic victory with multiple loopholes, it allows our legislators and polluters to claim that they've already taken climate action and can avoid taking more substantive action on climate change. And that's something we can't afford in this moment.
So I'm sorry, I'm up with a little bit of ignorance. The legislation is that correct?
Mark, I think everybody had a very hard time hearing you ask that question. You cut out repeatedly on video during the course of answering that.
I'm just trying to get some clarity. Con, you would have opposed the cap and trade legislation?
Yes, I would have voted no.
So you would have been in agreement with Republicans?
No, we have very different reasons. I absolutely have very different reasons. They are denying climate change, many of them. And I think it's possible for me to be able to oppose this particular legislation. And I've been very clear about my reasons for it without supporting the Republicans. And I absolutely oppose the Republican walkout and their strategies and tactics that are undermining our democracy.
To paraphrase, I think it seems like the Republicans thought that the bill went too far, and you think it doesn't go far enough.
Yes, we are. Yeah, exactly.
Mark, did that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Great. Nigel, you want to weigh in with any questions in this race?
I don't know if
Jeff,
you can hear you. I do have.
Jeff, I'd like you to address the elephant in the room. We know your history. You left the county. You resigned from the county under a cloud. You're asking voters to bring you back to public service. Could you just explain why should voters give you another chance?
Well, I left the county under a cloud, and I've worked to redeem myself since then. I worked at Impact Northwest for 4.5 years, and I took over that struggling nonprofit, and it was profitable when I left. And I think the voters are forgiving, and they will forgive me.
Do you feel that you learned anything from that time in the wilderness?
Yes, I learned. Yeah, I learned something. I learned that I should not have an affair. But I learned I have to treat my family right, and I didn't treat my family right then. And I have to treat my constituents right, and I didn't treat my constituents right then.
Jeff?
Yep.
I could be wrong, but if I look at Khan's endorsement page, she appears to have most of traditional organized labor tied up. I believe you have always been perceived to be a friend of organized labor.
Yep.
So what does she have that you don't?
Well, I'm a proven progressive leader with a long track record of results. My values are consistent, no matter who endorses or supports me. And I'm proud of the endorsements I have, which proves to me that I could go to Salem and be effective from day one.
Jeff, with all due respect, you didn't answer the question.
Well, I don't, they endorsed her because I don't know. We went in.
Well, I assume that you reached out to AFSCME and SEIU.
Absolutely.
And OEA and the Portland Association of Teachers
Yep.
and sought their endorsement, but you didn't get it. So was there a question you answered on the, was there a question that you answered that you think messed it up for you, or what's the issue?
Well, you'd have to ask them. I answered all the questions to the best of my knowledge, and I answered all the questions with my values intact. And
All right, well, then let me ask you this, and okay, we will. Were you surprised that you didn't get their endorsements?
Yes, I was. I was surprised.
Okay, thanks.
Con, let me ask that question in a different way to you. What do you think you said to those groups that persuaded them?
I don't think it was about how we perform in interviews. I think it's about our experiences, and I think it's also about what House District 46 needs in this moment. In this moment, there is, like I mentioned, some communities have never had representation in the state government, particularly Asians, Pacific Islanders, and other immigrant communities in House District 46, which is such an important and critical part of this district. And I think they saw the need that they saw that representation matters, and it's important that communities have a leader who's not just bringing their voices, but actually bringing them to the state capitol, bringing their experiences and their vision. We've shown that we have the vision and leadership, and this is an opportunity for us to bring it to the state level.
Let's unpack that for a second. What life experiences do you see yourself bringing to the Capitol that will inform your policy making?
Yeah, like I mentioned, I come from a refugee family. My husband is an immigrant from Mexico. These struggles that immigrant families, that low-income, working-class families are facing right now are experiences that I've had and that I will fight for when in the state capitol. During this economic recession, we're going to have to make tough choices in the state legislature about whose interests are going to be prioritized. And there's going to be a lot of corporate interests that are going to want bailouts and exemptions, and we need to make sure that we have someone who's going to fight for communities in this time of crisis.
Could I get you to go into a little bit more detail about what policy priorities you see being informed by your experiences living in those communities?
For example, I think that when we look at a recovery process, we need to make sure that immigrants, whatever their status, are getting the necessary support they need during this COVID crisis. We know that not everybody's going to get stimulus payments, and in my experiences, ensure that I recognize that the essential work that immigrants do for our economy, and right now more than ever, to help us get food to our table, needs to be recognized, and we need to provide necessary supports where the federal government isn't providing that support. That's a key area of difference that I will fight for because of my lived experience.
How do you grade the governor's performance so far during the COVID-19 crisis?
I think that it's a tough, unprecedented crisis. Like, anyone who says that they have the perfect answer I would question, because it's a very complicated situation. And what I appreciate, I think it's easy in hindsight to critique, but I think what I appreciate about the governor's response is that it's prioritizing public health. I know there's a lot of business, there's a lot of economic interest. I mean, our economy is being severely impacted, but we can't bring back people's lives. We can take steps to build the economic recovery, but we can't bring back the dead. And so I think I agree with the governor's response to prioritize public health first.
Jeff, how do you grade the governor's response so far?
I give it, I agree with what Con said, but I think that she has not done enough to help homeless individuals and families in Portland and throughout the state, because there are still homeless individuals and families living under the bridges, and I don't think there should be. I think that they should all get shelter or a place to live.
I would say that we do need to take immediate action, and I think our legislators, I look forward to the special session when we can actually take the actions that are needed.
Well, Jeff, are you thinking there that like we should just, and I'm not being sarcastic, I actually am thinking this sincerely, should we just grab Gordon Sondland's hotels and put people in them? They're empty.
Well, I don't know if we should do that, but we should put them somewhere. And Gordon Sondland's hotels they're not as good an answer as anything. We should just put them in city-owned land to be separate. But
Can I answer here?
Sure.
I see that San Francisco Board of Supervisors just did pass a resolution. And I think that's an important model because they're recognizing that if we don't deal with our homeless community and let, in currently as they are in shelters and outside, not sheltering in place 6 feet apart, it's risking a public health calamity that we need to take action on. And if we don't, whatever it costs to put people in hotel rooms is going to be dwarfed by the costs of hospital bills, of having to deal with an explosion of coronavirus cases in our homeless community. And that, if anything, we recognize that we are all interconnected in this crisis. And if we're not taking care of the most vulnerable, including our homeless community, it endangers all of us. And I absolutely think that hotel rooms, right now, our hotel industry is, obviously nobody is buying or renting these hotel rooms, and we need to make sure that we can actually offer discount rates. I'm sure we can get them for discount rates, but we need the government to take bold action to protect not just the homeless community, but our entire community.
The Portland government put homeless people in the Jupiter Hotel. Why can't they do it somewhere else?
So let me ask each of you this is a bit of a subject shift, to describe for us a moment in which you had to disappoint people who you agree with in order to make a decision you thought was the right one. Jeff, I'll let you go first on this one.
Disappoint people who I agree with in order to make something my values.
Or people who support you. In other words, this is a moment where I'm asking you to demonstrate a little independence. Tell us about a time in which people who support you politically had to be told no.
I can't think of something, but why don't you ask Con first, and then I'll think of something, because there are a number of things I've done, but I don't think any is occurring to me now.
Con, can you think of an example in your work in public service?
Well, for me, the cap and trade bill, or the cap and invest bill, was an extremely challenging decision to make, because we were actually being funded at a slight amount, but $15,000, and it was ensuring that we would not get funding for that amount and the future, and that we would be risking relationships with legislators who we needed their support for other key legislation. We didn't want to risk their support on even future legislation that we might pass by causing disappointment from legislators who I know overall we generally agree on and we have shared values with. So it was very hard for me to publicly come out in opposition, to send that letter publicly to the governor and publicize the reasons for opposition. But I knew that it was an important position, a public position I had to take, because it was going to cause more harm. And ultimately, I have to be accountable to my community, and I have to be accountable to my daughter, who I have to look in the eye and say, I am doing everything I can to make sure that you have a livable future and a livable planet.
It's a good answer. I'm just wondering, how was that endorsement decision tied to funding?
I'm saying the decision I made back in 2019 and 2018 was not about an endorsement. It was about Apano. I was at the time I was at Apano and Opal. So maybe I'm conflating things, but basically the endorsement process actually we actually had this exact conversation. Groups like the Oregon League of Conservation Voters, that's their first question they asked is, do you support cap and invest? And made it clear that was their main criteria for endorsement. And I had to explain why I still don't support it. And we had to, ultimately, they decided to endorse me, but not because I agreed to support their top priority for the last 5 years, but because they know that I have my reasons, that I explained my reasons to them, that they were based in my values, and that they understand that I'm still the strongest climate champion in the race, and that I will fight for their values, even if I disagree on strategy.
Got it. I'm using the word endorsement loosely, and I'm sorry. What I'm trying to understand is you mentioned at the beginning of that answer that there was $15,000 at stake for your nonprofit, and I'm just wondering in what way was that at stake?
I think I would just mean to say that in the past we had received $15,000
From the state.
from the coalition.
Got it. Jeff?
Well, when I ran the county previously, when I was the chair, I put a tax on motor vehicles, and I was in the group with hoteliers and motor vehicles, and they told me, you can't do this. No one will come to Portland and rent a motor vehicle. And I put a tax on it, and we had a 5% tax, and I doubled it. And people still rented motor vehicles. I mean, maybe there was a slight decrease, but they still rented motor vehicles. And it bolstered the county's revenues. It bolstered like $7 to $8 million a year for the county's revenues. And that's how I disappointed them, but I bolstered my values.
Great. All right, so we'd like to take this opportunity to have each of you ask your opponent a question. We often find that helps to get some sense of differentiation or distinction between the two of you. Colin, why don't you go first?
Jeff, I want to ask how can voters trust that you will be able to be accountable and represent their interests after you've betrayed their trust?
Well, I mean, they can trust me because in the last 7 years, I've proven trustworthy. I betrayed their trust when I was the county chair, but ever since then, I have not betrayed their trust. I worked at Democracy Resources, and I did a fine job with that. I worked at Impact Northwest, and I did a fine job with that. I didn't violate my family with all those things, and I didn't violate my constituent relationships with all those things. So they can trust me because I say you can trust me, and because I've demonstrated they can trust me.
Jeff, a question for your opponent. Oh, Mark, you're speaking, but you need to unmute.
How'd you know if I was speaking if I was on mute?
Your mouth is moving.
Okay. Jeff, I want to pin you down a little bit. How did you betray the county's trust? What specifically in your mind?
Well, I had an affair, and that betrays the trust that I put in my constituents and my family. I didn't betray the county's trust, but it betrayed my constituents and my family's trust.
Okay, so is it the affair specifically that in your mind is how you betrayed public trust?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Jeff, I think it's your turn to ask Con a question.
Con, can you tell me a little bit about when you opposed the Clean Energy Act or the Clean Power Act? What were you thinking about that? And did you mean to oppose the environmental constituents who are working on behalf of that?
When I was considering my opposition to the Clean Energy, what was formerly known as the Clean Energy Jobs Bill, I was thinking about my daughter. I was thinking about my communities back home in Vietnam and that are on the front lines, communities, Black and brown communities in California that have to suffer the impacts from the cap and trade system, and also the communities that are suffering the impacts if we don't get it right, if we don't take bold action. And that's why I thought carefully about my position and about the relationships that I value deeply. I absolutely have been very clear that that my opposition has nothing to do with the environmental partners that have fought so hard for it, that I share the goals. I had a fundamental disagreement about the effectiveness of auctioning and trading pollution credits, and whether in this moment in 2020, when we have 10 years left to take climate action, whether creating a carbon trading market was the most effective way to get greenhouse gas emissions reductions that we need to make.
All right, Mark and Nigel, you have any other questions before I ask the fun one?
Nope. Thank you.
Okay. So every election cycle, we ask a question that we consider to be fun for us, at least. And in this cycle, the question is, what's the experience of the quarantine that you're going to remember for the rest of your life? An individual moment. Jeff, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm going to remember not being able to go outside, and I'll remember drinking every night.
Fair enough. Con?
This quarantine, as challenging as it has been for me and my family, it has also provided an opportunity for me to spend more time with my daughter, Maya, than I've ever had. And I will forever remember teaching her how to ride her bicycle. She doesn't know yet, but I've been pushing her along and she's getting the balance. And I will forever remember her learning how to write and read. She's still in, it's still incredibly cute scribbles, but these are moments that as a parent, in our working lives, we often miss because her teachers get that. And now I've been able to share those moments that I will never forget.
Great. Thanks to both of you for taking the time with us today. We really appreciate it. Have a safe and healthy afternoon.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.